My name's Donald Lane, and 3 weeks ago I took a job that I probably should have walked away from the minute I heard the details. But I needed the work, and night shifts paid better than anything else I could find around here. The Pineview Motel sits about 40 miles outside town on Highway 95, surrounded by nothing but pine trees and the kind of darkness that makes you forget there's a world beyond the parking lot. It's one of those places truckers stop when they can't make it to the next town, or families use when their car breaks down and they need somewhere cheap to wait for morning. I pulled into the gravel lot just before 11 that first night. The place looked tired. Faded yellow paint on the office building, neon sign missing half its letters. But it was clean enough, and the parking lot had decent lighting. I'd seen worse. Luna Myers was waiting for me in the office. She's maybe 65, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, the kind of woman who probably ran a tight ship back when the motel saw more business. She looked me over when I walked in, like she was deciding something. "You're Donald?" she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am. Ready to start." She nodded and reached into her desk drawer. What she pulled out wasn't a timesheet or employee handbook. It was a piece of paper covered in careful handwriting. She set it on the counter between us. "These are the rules," she said. Devon wrote them down for whoever came after him. I looked at the paper. 5 numbered items in blue ink, written in block letters like someone wanted to make sure every word was clear. Devon's the guy who had this job before me? For 15 years. Luna's voice got quiet. Until 3 weeks ago. I waited for her to explain, but she just stood there watching me. Finally, I asked, "What happened to him?" "He disappeared." She said it matter of fact, like she was telling me the weather. Middle of his shift. Guests in room 4 heard screaming around midnight, then saw strange lights coming from the office. When the sheriff got here, Devon was gone. My stomach dropped a little. Gone how? Just gone. No blood, no signs of struggle. His car was still in the parking lot, keys in his pocket on the desk, but no Devon. I stared at her. "And you want me to work nights here?" "I need someone to work nights here." Luna leaned forward. "Look, Donald, I'm not going to lie to you. This place has its problems. But if you follow those rules exactly, and I mean exactly, you'll be fine." I picked up the paper and read the first rule. Never investigate screams from room 2, no matter how loud or how long they last. "What kind of problems?" I asked. Luna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, she chose her words carefully. "The Pineview has been here since 1962. It's seen a lot of things over the years. Some of those things, they left marks." I read the second rule. Check the pool at exactly 3 a.m. If anyone is swimming, politely ask them to leave. They must be out of the water by 3:10. "What kind of marks?" "The kind that make rules necessary." Luna took the paper from my hands and set it back on the counter. Devon lasted 15 years because he followed these rules. The night he disappeared, security cameras show him walking toward room 2 around 11:45. He'd never done that before. I felt cold all of a sudden. The office was warm enough, but something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. Why would he break the rules after 15 years? "I don't know." Luna's voice got even quieter. "Maybe he got curious. Maybe he thought he knew better. Maybe something made him forget." I looked at the rules again. The third one, only assign even-numbered rooms to guests. If no even rooms are available, the motel is full. These seem pretty specific. Devon wrote them down after his first year, said he figured out what worked and what didn't. Luna pulled a set of keys from her purse. He updated them a few times, but these 5 never changed. The 4th rule, if anyone requests room 5 specifically, give them room 8 instead and offer a complimentary breakfast. Do not explain why. "What's wrong with room 5? Luna looked at me for a long time. "Some questions are better left unasked, Donald. That's the first thing you need to learn about working here. I read the last rule. Do not approach any dogs you see in the parking lot. They are not dogs. That one made me stop. They're not dogs? No. Luna said it so simply, like she was telling me the sky was blue. They're not. I set the paper down and looked around the office. It seemed normal enough. Front desk, computer for checking guests in, coffee pot on a side table. A door led to what looked like a small apartment in the back. You live here? For 30 years. Luna followed my gaze. I'm usually asleep during your shift, but I'm a light sleeper. If something happens that's not covered by the rules, you can knock on my door. What if something happens that is covered by the rules? Then you follow them and don't knock on my door. She handed me the keys, 3 of them on a ring, office, supply closet, and something labeled emergency only in the same careful handwriting as the rules. What's the emergency key for? Hopefully nothing you'll ever need to know about. Luna gathered her purse. Your shift starts now and ends at 7 a.m. I'll be back then to take over. The computer system is pretty straightforward. Devon left notes about the daily routines. She headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. Donald? Yes, ma'am? Those rules aren't suggestions. They're not guidelines. They're the difference between going home in the morning and ending up like Devon. Her pale blue eyes were serious. Do you understand? I looked at the paper again, then back at her. I understand. Good. Luna opened the door. And Donald? If you start feeling curious about why the rules exist, remember what happened to the man who wrote them. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the office with 5 rules and a whole lot of questions I apparently wasn't supposed to ask. I sat down behind the desk and read through the rules one more time. They didn't make sense, but Luna's tone had been clear enough. Follow them exactly or disappear like Devon. The clock on the wall showed 11:15, 8 hours until sunrise. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my shirt pocket, right where I could reach it if I needed to. I'd been working at the Pine View for just over a week when I heard my first scream from room 2. It happened around 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I was doing paperwork at the front desk, getting used to the routine of logging guest arrivals and checking the parking lot every so often. The motel was quiet. We only had 3 rooms occupied that night, all even numbers, like the rules said. The sound cut through the silence without warning. I can't really describe what I heard. It wasn't human, that much I knew right away. But it wasn't animal either. It was something caught between agony and rage, like someone was being torn apart while screaming in fury about it. The sound went on for maybe 10 seconds, rising and falling in pitch. My hands started shaking before my brain even caught up to what was happening. I looked at the clock. 11:32. I looked toward the door, knowing room 2 sat just outside in the dark. The scream came again, shorter this time, but just as wrong. It made my teeth ache. Then I remembered the rules. Rule number 1, written in Devon's careful block letters. Never investigate screams from room 2. I pulled the folded paper from my shirt pocket with trembling fingers and read it again, just to be sure. Never investigate screams from room 2. Simple and direct. But sitting there, listening to those sounds, every instinct I had told me someone was in serious trouble. The screaming stopped. I waited, gripping the edge of the desk. The silence felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on the whole building. I kept staring at the door, expecting someone to come running in, asking for help. But nobody came. 5 minutes passed, then 10. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I thought about Luna's words from my first night. The rules exist for a reason. Devon learned that the hard way. Follow them exactly. But this felt different from following some arbitrary guideline. This felt like ignoring someone who might be dying 50 feet away from me. Another scream erupted longer than the others. This time I could hear something that might have been words mixed in with the sound, but they were in no language I recognized. The hair on my arm stood up. That's when I reached for the phone and dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? This is Donald Lane at the Pineview Motel on Highway 95. I'm hearing screams from one of the rooms. It sounds like someone's being hurt. Are you able to check on the guests, sir? I looked at the rules again. No, I can't get to the room safely. Units are on the way. Stay on the line with me. The dispatcher kept me talking while we waited. She asked about the motel's location, how many guests we had, whether I'd seen anyone suspicious. I answered as best I could, but my attention kept drifting to room 2. The screaming had stopped again, but now I could hear something else. A low sound, almost like humming, but with an electronic quality to it. 20 minutes later, I saw headlights sweep across the office windows. Sheriff Murphy's patrol car pulled into the lot, followed by a second vehicle. I recognized Deputy Calhoun from the previous week when she'd stopped by to check on things. Murphy knocked on the office door. I let him in, grateful to see another person. You called about screaming? He asked. He looked tired, like this wasn't his first strange call of the night. Room 2. It started about 20 minutes ago. Anyone checked on the guest? There is no guest in room 2. That room's not supposed to be occupied. Murphy and Calhoun exchanged a look. Show us, Murphy said. We walked outside together. The parking lot felt different at night, bigger somehow. The pine trees around the edges seemed to lean in closer than they did during the day. Our footsteps crunched on the gravel. Room 2 sat dark and quiet. The door was painted the same faded green as all the others, with the number 2 in brass digits that had turned black with age. A small window sat beside the door, covered by heavy curtains from the inside. Murphy knocked. Sheriff's Department. Anyone in there? Nothing. He tried the door handle. Locked. You got a key? He asked me. I did. Luna had given me a master key for emergencies. I unlocked the door, and Murphy pushed it open, his flashlight ready. The beams swept across an empty room. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. No furniture, no carpet, no fixtures. Just bare walls, a concrete floor, and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling on a frayed cord. The air that drifted out smelled like dust and something else I couldn't identify. Something sweet and rotten. Huh, Calhoun said. She stepped into the room and looked around. Same as always. Murphy nodded. He didn't seem surprised. 7th time in 2 years we've gotten this call. Never find anything. I stared at them. 7th time? Different night clerks, Murphy explained. But always the same story. Screaming from room 2, room turns out to be empty. He clicked off his flashlight. You new here? Started last week. Well, now you know. This place has its quirks. Quirks. He said it like we were talking about a leaky faucet or a door that stuck. We stood there for another minute, looking at the empty room. The concrete floor was clean, like it had been swept recently. The walls showed no signs of damage or disturbance. If someone had been screaming in agony 20 minutes ago, they'd left no trace of it. Any idea what causes it? I asked. Murphy shrugged. Above my pay grade. Long as nobody gets hurt, we just file the report and move on. Nobody gets hurt? Not from the screaming, anyway. He gave me a steady look. Your predecessor, Devon, he handled these calls fine for years. Just got to know when to leave things alone. They walked back to their cars, and I watched their taillights disappear down Highway 95. Then I was alone again with the empty room and the rules in my pocket. I locked room 2 and went back to the office. The clock showed 12:15. Still had almost 7 hours left on my shift. I sat behind the desk and pulled out Devon's rules again. Never investigate screams from room 2. The words looked different now, more urgent. This wasn't some arbitrary instruction. This was survival information written by someone who'd learned it the hard way. I thought about Murphy's words, 7 calls in 2 years, different night clerks. That meant other people had worked here between Devon's disappearance and my arrival. People who hadn't lasted. The empty room bothered me more than the screaming had. The screaming at least suggested something was happening, even if I couldn't understand what. But the empty room suggested that whatever was happening operated by rules I couldn't begin to guess at. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. My hands had finally stopped shaking. The rest of the night passed without incident. No more screams, no strange sounds. Just the normal quiet of a roadside motel in the middle of nowhere. But I found myself checking the clock more often, counting down the hours until sunrise. When Luna arrived at 7 a.m. to take over, she took one look at my face and nodded. "You heard it," she said. "Room 2. The deputies said this happens regularly. About once a month, give or take. You called 911. Yeah. They didn't seem surprised by any of it. Luna poured herself coffee from the pot I'd kept fresh all night. Murphy and Calhoun have been dealing with this place for years. They understand how things work here. How do things work here? She looked at me over her coffee cup. You follow the rules. You go home safe in the morning. You don't follow the rules. She gestured toward the empty parking space where Devon used to park his car. I gathered my things and headed for the door. As I stepped outside, I glanced toward room 2. In the morning light, it looked like any other motel room, just a door and a window and a number on the wall. But I knew what I'd heard, and I knew what the deputies had found. The Pineview Motel operated under different laws than the outside world, and I was starting to understand why Devon Weber had lasted 15 years by following these exact protocols. I'd been working at the Pineview for about a month when I finally met whatever lived in the pool. October had turned cold. Real cold. The kind that makes you pull your jacket tight and hurry between buildings. I'd gotten used to most of the routine by then. The paperwork, the occasional late arrival, the way the coffee pot made that grinding sound around 2 in the morning. But I hadn't run into anything that needed the rules yet. Not since that second week with the screaming. I kept the folded paper in my shirt pocket anyway. Checked it was there maybe 10 times a shift. The night started quiet. Tuesday again. Only 2 rooms occupied, 6 and 8. A traveling salesman in 6 who'd checked in around 9, and an older couple in 8 who'd been driving cross-country and looked dead tired. Both paid cash. Both took their keys and went straight to their rooms without much conversation. I spent most of the first few hours reading a paperback I'd brought and doing the daily reports Luna needed. The heating system kicked on around midnight, making the whole building settle with these low groans, normal sounds. I was getting used to them. At 2:45, I put down my book and looked at the clock. 15 minutes. Rule number 2 said to check the pool at exactly 3 a.m. Make sure any swimmers leave by 3:10. I'd read it probably 100 times by now, but it still seemed weird. Who'd be swimming in October? Especially out here, 40 miles from anywhere. But Devon wrote the rules for a reason. I'd learned that much. I grabbed my jacket and the flashlight from the desk drawer. The night air hit my face like a slap when I stepped outside. Had to be close to freezing. My breath came out in white puffs, and I could see frost starting to form on the windshields in the parking lot. The pool sat behind the motel, surrounded by a chain-link fence with a gate that was supposed to stay locked after 10 p.m. I'd checked it a few times during my rounds, but always found it empty. Just dark water and pool furniture covered in tarps. I walked across the gravel, my footsteps loud in the quiet. The gate was open. That stopped me. I knew I'd checked it last week. Luna had shown me during my first day, always make sure the gate's locked after 10, she'd said. Insurance liability. But there it was, hanging open on its hinges. I stepped through and heard it. Soft, splashing sounds. Rhythmic. Like someone doing laps. The pool lights were off, but my flashlight cut through the darkness and caught movement in the water. Someone was swimming. Actually swimming, in water that had to be just a few degrees above freezing. I checked my watch. 3 a.m. exactly. The swimmer was a woman, maybe in her 40s. She moved through the water like it was summer, her strokes smooth and even. Freestyle, breathing every third stroke. She reached the far end, did a perfect flip turn, and started back toward me. I stood there watching for maybe 30 seconds. She had to know I was there. The flashlight beam was hitting the water right near her, but she didn't look up. Just kept swimming, lap after lap. The cold was starting to get to me. My fingers were going numb around the flashlight, but she didn't seem affected at all. No shivering, no hurrying to get out. Just those steady, measured strokes. I remembered the rule. Make sure any swimmers leave by 3:10. "Excuse me," I called out. She didn't stop swimming. I walked closer to the edge. "Ma'am, the pool's closed now. You need to get out." This time she heard me. She finished her stroke and stood up in the shallow end, water streaming off her shoulders. She was wearing a one-piece swimming suit, the kind you'd see in old photos. Looked like it might have been blue once, but it was hard to tell in the flashlight beam. "The pool closes at 3 a.m., I said. "I'm sorry, but you need to leave now." She looked right at me. Her eyes reflected the flashlight like an animal's, just for a second. Then she nodded once and started walking toward the ladder. That's when I noticed how wrong everything was. Her skin was pale. Not just pale from the cold, pale like she'd never seen sun. And when she moved through the water, she didn't make the sound you'd expect. No splashing, no breathing hard from the cold, just this weird silence. She climbed out of the pool without using her hands on the ladder, just stepped up and out like the water was pushing her, stood there dripping on the concrete, not shivering at all. I wanted to ask if she was okay, if she needed a towel or wanted to warm up in the office, but something kept my mouth shut. Maybe the way she moved. Maybe how her wet footprints on the concrete looked too dark. She walked past me toward the gate. Didn't say anything. Didn't look back. Her bare feet made no sound on the gravel. I followed her with the flashlight beam until she reached the parking lot. Then she just kept walking, past the cars, past the road, into the darkness beyond the tree line. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes listening. No car doors, no engine starting, nothing. When I finally went back inside, I checked the clock. 3:08. The rest of the night crawled by. I kept looking out the office windows, expecting to see her walking back, or maybe see her car in the lot. But there was nothing, just the normal sounds of the building settling and the heater cycling on and off. I thought about calling Luna. But what would I say? I followed the rule and it worked. She'd probably just tell me that was the point. At 7 a.m., Luna arrived with her usual cup of coffee and stack of newspapers. She took one look at my face and set everything down on the counter. "You met someone at the pool," she said. Not a question, a statement. "How'd you know?" "You have that look. Same one Devon had after his first time." She poured herself coffee from the pot I'd made around 5. "Tell me what happened." I went through it step by step. The open gate, the woman swimming, how she left without saying anything. Luna listened without interrupting, but I watched her face get paler as I talked. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to the office filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder. Took out a yellowed newspaper clipping and handed it to me. The headline read, "Local Woman Drowns at Motel Pool." The date was October 15th, 1987. Below that was a photograph of the same woman I'd seen an hour ago. Same face, same hair, even the same swimming suit. Caitlin Hansen, Luna said quietly. 43 years old. Was staying in room 6 with her husband. He found her in the pool around 4 a.m. I read the article twice. It said she'd been an excellent swimmer, competed in college. No explanation for why she'd drowned in 4 feet of water. That was 15 years ago, I said. 15 years next month. I looked at the photo again. The woman in the newspaper looked exactly like the woman I'd just talked to. Not similar. Exactly the same. The rule, I said. The rule. Luna took the clipping back and filed it away. 3 a.m. to 3:10. That's when she swims. Every few weeks, usually when it gets cold like this. Devon figured out the timing after she scared the hell out of a couple of guests who found her in the pool at 3:30. What happens if you don't follow the rule? Luna was quiet for a moment. Devon never told me exactly, but he said the timing mattered. 3:10 was important. I thought about how she'd looked at me. Those eyes that reflected light wrong. How quiet she'd been in the water. She listened when I told her to leave. She always does. As long as you ask by 3:10, Luna started organizing the papers on her desk. After that, she shrugged. Devon said it was better not to find out. I gathered my jacket and keys. Another shift done. Another rule that made sense now. At the door, I turned back. Why doesn't she just stay away from the pool? Luna looked up from her paperwork. I don't think she can. Some things get stuck, Donald. Stuck doing the same thing over and over. She went back to her papers. That's why the rules matter. We can't change what's here, but we can work around it. I walked to my car thinking about Caitlin Hansen, swimming laps in freezing water for 15 years. Following the same routine. Showing up every few weeks to do what she'd been doing the night she died. The sun was coming up over the tree line and everything looked normal again. Just a motel and a pool and a parking lot. But I knew better now. I'd followed rule number 2 exactly right, and we'd both gone our separate ways. I'd been working at the Pineview for 3 months when I got good at handling the weird requests. You know the ones I mean. People who didn't just want a room, but wanted room 5 specifically. It happened maybe once a week. Someone would walk through the office door, usually around midnight or later, and they'd have this look. Hard to describe exactly, but their eyes would be too bright, too focused. They'd lean against the counter and ask for room 5 like they already knew we had it. The first few times I fumbled through it, checked the computer, pretended to look confused, made up some story about plumbing issues. But Luna pulled me aside after the second week and showed me how to do it right. Apologize for the booking error, she'd said, writing it down on a scrap of paper. Offer room 8 instead. Give them the breakfast voucher. Most of them will take it. Most of them did, but not all. This one guy came in on a Thursday night around 1:30, middle-aged, wearing a decent suit that looked like he'd been driving in it for hours. He walked up to the desk and didn't even look at me when he spoke. I need room 5. I pulled up the computer screen and clicked around for a few seconds. I'm really sorry, but there's been a booking error in our system. Room 5 isn't available tonight. His head snapped up then. Those 2 bright eyes locked onto mine. But I can put you in room 8 instead, I continued, reaching for the breakfast vouchers Luna kept in the desk drawer. And I'll throw in a complimentary breakfast to make up for the inconvenience. The guy stared at me for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Disappointment, maybe. Or frustration. He glanced toward the hallway that led to the rooms, then back at me. Room 8, he repeated. That's right. It's actually our nicest room. Queen bed, better view of the parking lot. He took the key and the voucher without another word. But as he walked away, I heard him mutter something under his breath. Sounded like, supposed to be 5. I watched him through the window as he found room 8. He stood outside the door for a minute, key in his hand, looking back toward where room 5 would be. Then he went inside. That's when I started paying attention to the odd numbered rooms during my day walks. Luna had me doing maintenance checks twice a week, Just basic stuff. Making sure the ice machine worked, checking that all the outdoor lights were functioning. I'd usually do it around noon when the sun was high and everything looked normal, but the odd-numbered rooms never looked normal. Rooms 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. They sat there between the even-numbered ones, doors painted the same faded blue, but something was off about them. The windows were always dark. Not just closed curtains dark, deep, empty dark, like looking into a well. One afternoon, I got curious about room 5, the same room people kept asking for. I walked up to the window and cupped my hands against the glass to peer inside. What I saw didn't make sense. The room stretched back way farther than it should have. I could see part of a bed, or what looked like a bed, but it seemed to be sitting maybe 30 feet from the window. The motel rooms were only about 15 feet deep. I stepped back and looked at the building from the side, counted the rooms. Room 4, then room 5, then room 6. They were all the same size from the outside. I went back to the window. Same thing, that impossible depth, like the room just kept going back into darkness. I tried room 3 next. Same deal. The space inside looked huge, empty, wrong. Like someone had built a normal motel room and then stretched it out until it became something else. Room 7 was the worst. When I looked through that window, I couldn't see anything at all. Just black. But not the black of an empty room. The black of some place that went down, instead of back. I stopped checking the odd-numbered rooms after that. The dog showed up during my 3rd month on a Tuesday night when we only had one guest. I was doing paperwork around 2 in the morning when I glanced out the office window and saw it sitting under the streetlight in the middle of the parking lot. Big German Shepherd, completely still, just sitting there like it was waiting for something. At first I figured it was a stray. We got them sometimes. People dumped dogs out on the highway and they'd wander onto the property looking for food. Luna kept a bag of kibble in the supply closet for situations like that. But this dog wasn't acting like a stray. It sat perfectly straight, not moving at all. Didn't sniff around or check the garbage cans or do any of the normal dog things. Just sat there under the light, staring at the office. I watched it for maybe 10 minutes. It never shifted position, never looked away. Then, real slow, it turned its head toward me. That's when I knew something was wrong. The movement was too smooth, too deliberate. Like a person turning to look at you, not an animal. And when its eyes caught the streetlight, they reflected back with this bright, steady gleam that didn't look right. But the worst part was its mouth. Dogs don't smile. I know that. But this thing's mouth was definitely curved upward at the corners. Lips pulled back just enough to show its teeth. Not snarling or panting, smiling. I stepped away from the window and checked the locks on the office door. Then I went back to the desk and tried to focus on the paperwork, but I kept glancing up to see if it was still there. It was. Still sitting in the exact same spot, still looking toward the office with that human intelligence in its eyes. Around 3, I had to do the pool check. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight, but when I looked out the window again, the dog was gone. I did the pool walk as fast as I could. Nobody there, thank God. Just cold water and empty chairs. When I got back to the office, the dog was sitting under the streetlight again. This time it was facing the other direction, looking toward the tree line. But as soon as I sat down at the desk, it turned its head back toward me with that same too smooth motion. I stayed away from the windows for the rest of the night. Around 5:30, I heard what sounded like footsteps on gravel, not paws, footsteps, moving away from the office toward the road. When I finally looked outside again at dawn, the parking lot was empty. I didn't tell Luna about it. Figured maybe it was a one-time thing, some weird stray that would move on and not come back. But it did come back. Maybe once a month, always the same routine. Always sitting under that streetlight, always watching the office with those 2 bright eyes and that wrong smile. The fourth time it showed up, I was ready for it. I'd been thinking about rule number 5. Do not approach dogs in the parking lot because they are not actually dogs, and I wanted to test something. When I spotted it out there, I turned on the office's exterior floodlight, the one Luna used for late check-ins, mounted above the door. The dog looked up at the light, and that's when I saw its face clearly. It had a dog's body, a dog's fur, a dog's general shape, but the expression on its face was completely human, not just intelligent, human, like someone was wearing a dog costume but couldn't quite get the face right. It looked directly at me through the window and tilted its head in a way that seemed almost curious. Then it stood up, not the way a dog stands, but the way a person would if they'd been sitting cross-legged and needed to stretch their legs. I turned off the floodlight and moved away from the window. When dawn came and it finally left, I could swear I heard it walking away on 2 feet instead of 4. I'd been at the Pine View for 6 months when I realized the pattern wasn't random at all. Everything had a schedule. The screams from room 2 came every 3 to 4 weeks, usually between 11:30 and midnight. I'd learned to recognize the signs about an hour before it happened. The air got heavy, like before a thunderstorm, and the office felt smaller somehow. When it started, I didn't even flinch anymore, just reached for the phone and dialed 911. Pineview Motel, Highway 95, I'd tell the dispatcher. Screams from room 2 again. They knew the routine by now. Murphy and Calhoun would show up 20 minutes later. We'd unlock the empty room, find nothing, and they'd leave. Murphy always gave me the same look before heading out, part sympathy, part warning. Don't dig deeper than you need to. The pool checks happened more often than I'd first thought. At least twice a month, sometimes 3 times if the weather stayed cold. Always at 3 a.m. sharp. I'd walk out there with my flashlight, and more often than not, someone would be swimming. Different people each time. But they all had that same pale skin, those same reflecting eyes. I'd gotten good at the timing. Pools closed, I'd call out at exactly 3 a.m. They'd always stop, look at me with those strange eyes, and nod. Then they'd climb out without using the ladder or their hands, walk past me like I wasn't there, and disappear into the trees. Never heard a car start. Never saw where they went. The dog things were the worst part. They didn't follow a schedule I could figure out. Sometimes I'd go 2 months without seeing one, then 3 would show up in the same week. Always at night, always sitting under that streetlight, always watching the office with those human eyes and animal faces. I'd started keeping a log in my desk drawer. Not because Luna asked me to, but because I needed to see the patterns. Screams. Every 26 to 28 days. Pool swimmers. Every 14 to 21 days when temperature dropped below 40 degrees. Dogs. No pattern I could find, but never during the first week of any month. The pay made sense now. Luna had explained it during my 2nd month when I'd finally asked why the job paid twice what any other night work offered. Hazard compensation, she'd said, not looking up from her paperwork. You're not just managing a motel, Donald. You're managing what comes with it. That was all she'd say about it. But the money was real enough. More than I'd made at any job before. And all I had to do was follow 5 simple rules and deal with things that shouldn't exist. I'd gotten comfortable with the routine. Too comfortable, maybe. I knew when to expect the screams, knew how to handle the swimmers, knew to stay inside when the dogs showed up. I kept the police number on speed dial, memorized every word of Devon's rules, and never deviated from the protocols. The rules worked. That's what mattered. 3 months ago, I'd been terrified of this place. Now it felt normal. That should have worried me more than it did. When you stop being scared of things that should scare you, when you start treating impossible things like routine maintenance, maybe you're becoming something different than what you were. But the pay was good, and I was still alive, and Luna seemed satisfied with my work. I showed up at 11 p.m., followed the rules, and went home at 7 a.m. Simple, The guests never seemed to notice anything wrong. The traveling salesmen, the families passing through, the couples on road trips, they'd check in, sleep in their even-numbered rooms, and check out the next morning without ever knowing what happened after midnight. That was part of the job, too, I'd realized. Keeping the normal world separate from whatever the Pineview really was. I'd started thinking of myself as a translator between two different kinds of reality. During the day, the motel was just a roadside stop with faded paint and decent rates. At night, it became something else entirely. My job was to make sure those two versions never met. Most of the time, it worked fine. The rules covered almost everything. But I'd started noticing small things that didn't fit the pattern. Little changes that made me wonder if the situation was as stable as I'd thought. The emergency key Luna had given me on my first night, I'd never used it. Devon's rules didn't mention when or why I'd need it. Sometimes I'd take it out and look at it, wondering what door it opened and what I'd find behind that door. I never asked Luna about it. Some questions felt too dangerous to voice. Tonight was a Tuesday in April, and I had 2 guests in rooms 4 and 6. Quiet night so far. The log in my desk said it had been 24 days since the last screaming episode, which meant I was probably due for another one soon. The pool check was still 5 hours away, and I hadn't seen any dogs in 3 weeks. I settled into the desk chair with my coffee and paperback. Just another normal night at the Pineview Motel, where normal meant something completely different than it did anywhere else. I'd been working at the Pineview Motel for exactly 1 year. The thought hit me around 2 in the morning while I sat behind the front desk, staring at the guest registry. February nights were the quietest. Too cold for most travelers to want to stop at a rundown motel 40 miles from anywhere. Only one room was occupied tonight. Room 6. A trucker who'd checked in around 11 paid cash and asked for a wake-up call at 6. Normal guest. Normal request. The kind of ordinary interaction that kept me grounded between the screaming and the pool checks, and the things that looked like dogs but weren't. I flipped through the registry pages, going backward through months of entries. My handwriting filled most of the recent pages. Neat, careful notes about check-ins and check-outs. Luna's writing appeared during the day shifts, different pen, different style. But I kept going back, looking for something I'd never really examined before. Then I found it. Devon Weber's final entry. The date was February 8th, which made it exactly 1 year and 3 weeks ago. I checked the calendar on the desk to be sure. Yeah, 3 weeks before I'd started working here. Devon's handwriting was different from what I'd expected. The rules he'd written for me were in block letters, careful and precise. But this registry entry was rushed, sloppy, like he'd been writing fast. The entry started normal enough. Guest in room 4. Mr. Patterson. Paid for 2 nights. Standard stuff. But then the writing got messier. Guest asking questions about room 5. Told him booking error. Gave him room 8. But he knows. They always know when they're supposed to be in the odd rooms. I read that line twice. Devon had figured out the same thing I'd noticed. That the guests who asked for room 5 weren't just random people making requests. They had some kind of connection to those impossible spaces. The entry continued. Been thinking about what happens if we don't follow the rules. Been thinking too much about it. Luna says don't think, just follow. But after 15 years, I need to understand. My hands went cold reading that. I'd had the same thoughts, especially during the quiet nights. The rules kept us safe. But they didn't explain anything. And not knowing why you're doing something. That wears on you after a while. But then Devon's writing got even sloppier, like his hand was shaking. Checked the pool at 3. Caitlin was there, same as always. But tonight she looked at me different. Like she was trying to tell me something. Like she was warning me. I thought about my own pool checks. Caitlin Hansen, the woman who'd drowned in '87, swimming her endless laps in the freezing water. She'd always been polite when I told her to leave. Quiet. Never threatening. but Devon made it sound like something had changed. The next part was harder to read. Devon's handwriting was getting worse with each line. The dog came back tonight, third time this month. That's not normal, usually once a month, maybe twice, but it's been watching the office more, and I think I know why. I'd never seen the dog 3 times in 1 month. Even during my busiest periods, it stuck to its pattern. Once a month, sometimes skipping a month entirely. But 3 times? That seemed like escalation. The final paragraph was where things got really bad. Devon's writing was barely legible, like he was rushing to get the words down. Guest in room 4 asked me about room 7 tonight. Said he could hear something moving around in there during the day. I told him the room was storage, but he didn't believe me. Nobody's ever asked about room 7 before. That's the deep one. The one that goes down instead of back. Room 7. I'd only looked in that window once, months ago. The darkness in there didn't look like an empty room. It looked like a hole, like something that went down and down without ending. I'd never heard anything moving in there, but then again, I'd never really listened. The entry was supposed to continue. I could see where Devon had started writing the next sentence, but it cut off mid-word. Never trust the guests in odd-numbered rooms, because they're not really That was it. The pen had stopped moving. Whatever word Devon was trying to write, he'd never finished it. Guests? Guards? Something else entirely? I stared at the incomplete sentence for a long time. Devon had been trying to warn whoever came after him, trying to add a 6th rule, maybe, but he'd never gotten the chance to finish writing it. I closed the registry and checked my watch. 3:45 in the morning. 3 hours and 15 minutes until Luna arrived for the day shift. 3 hours and 15 minutes until I could go home, assuming nothing went wrong between now and then. The thing that bothered me most wasn't what Devon had written. It was when he'd written it. His final shift, the night he'd disappeared. He'd been working on this entry when whatever happened to him had happened. Maybe he'd heard something. Maybe he'd seen something. Maybe one of those guests in the odd-numbered rooms had finally shown up. I thought about my own year at the Pine View. 12 months of following the rules exactly. 12 months of surviving things that shouldn't exist. I'd gotten comfortable with the routine, maybe too comfortable. I'd started thinking of the screaming and the pool checks and the dog visits as normal parts of the job. But Devon had 15 years of experience. 15 years of following his own rules perfectly, and something had still gotten him in the end. I pulled the folded rules from my shirt pocket and read them again. 5 simple instructions that had kept me alive for 365 nights. But looking at Devon's final entry, I wondered if the rules were enough, if following them perfectly was really a guarantee of safety or just a way to postpone whatever had happened to my predecessor. The office felt smaller tonight. The shadows in the corners looked deeper. And for the first time in months, I found myself watching the door and wondering what might walk through it before dawn. I had reached the same milestone where Devon had disappeared, and I understood now that my survival depended entirely on maintaining the same rigid adherence to the rules that had kept me alive for the past 12 months.